Hello everybody, this is City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today for a hop called Dog Days of Summer. For this hop, I'm going to be using a Laura Whitaker sketch. And if you're not familiar with Laura Whitaker, she has amazing sketches. This was from her book called The Stuck Sketches Sketchbook, and I will put a link in the description box to where you can take a look at these Laura Whitaker sketches. So the sketch called for 3 photos, and I have photos of each of my dogs. I have 3 dogs, and a cluster to the upper left-hand side, and then a very small cluster on the lower right-hand side. So I started by taking some acrylic paint, some black acrylic paint. I used a few lids of different items in my scrapbooking room, and I made some circles. I just dipped the lid, as you saw, into the acrylic paint. Now I'm using some background stamps and some Staz On ink, and I'm just adding just a few little touches of texture just to those areas that have the circles in them. For this layout, we could choose to make a layout about the summer, and then if you have dogs, you could make a layout about your dogs in the summer, or you could just make a layout about your dogs. So I decided that I was going to make a layout about my 3 dogs and how they always like to sit on this chair that's in my living room near the window. I have a few dog themed paper collections, and one of them is called Playful Pets, and that's by Die Cuts with a View. So I decided that I would use those papers. In the background, I wanted to put some sprays. I'm using the packaging technique and just smushing down some color in the background. The color I'm using right now is called Spring Dandelion, and that's made by Prima, and those are called the Color Bloom sprays. The turquoise-ish color that I'm using right now is an Art Anthology spray, and the color there is Siesta Key. I picked 2 colors that were in the collection that I thought would look nice together and that I thought wouldn't be too bold in the background. I don't want to add too much color because I don't want the background to overpower the rest of the layout. So I am trying to be conservative with the color, but that is not something that I'm very good at, so I have to really control myself. Here I'm adding another circle to that cluster that's on the top. I just wanted to make sure that there was a circle kind of popping out from underneath the photos. So I dried the background before adding the water, but I did sprinkle on some water, and now I'm using some paper towel to blot that water up, and then that lifts off a little bit of the color and it creates a cool effect. I'm following along closely with this sketch, so I'm adding some banners, one to each of the clusters, and that's how I'm going to be positioning my photos, with the 2 on the top and the 1 on the bottom. So I cut a fishtail on one side of this banner, and then I use the other side as kind of a template so that the fishtail would match on both sides. And then I'm using another strip of paper to make a second little banner, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm pretty happy with the way this is looking. I like these papers. I think that they're bold enough that they don't let the background overpower them. I'm edging all of these banners with some Distress Oxide and black soot, just using my dauber to apply it to the edges. And then I'm doing the same thing to the photos. And that will just help add to the uniformity of the layout and also help to contrast the elements with the background. So I wanted to attach the 2 banners together, but I wasn't quite ready to attach them down to the background yet. Now I'm going to attach my 3 photos to each other. I wanted the cluster to be set, so I put a little bit of ATG adhesive on the back of 2 of them, and then I just spent a little bit of time arranging them so that I like the way that the photos are arranged and balanced and nothing important gets covered up. So I'm happy with the way that they look. So I cover the back with some foam. And if you do cover the back of more than one photo with foam like this, I feel like you have to be really careful because it's really hard to go back and change it. The foam really holds the pictures together. And now I'm attaching them down to the banner, and I attach the banner on the bottom down to the page. So now all the major elements of the page are attached down, or at least attached to each other. And I wanted to add some of these papers behind the photos, just to add a little bit more layering to the layout. I'm using the 6x6" paper pad, and I'm right now just kind of fussing around with the layering to see what I think will look the best. And I ink the edges of these pieces of paper with the black soot as well. So I spend a little bit of time figuring out how I want to arrange these pieces. I only had kind of a small piece of that dotted blue paper, but I really liked it for that spot. So I wanted to make sure that I played around with it until I liked the way it was positioned. I'm adding some splatters to the background. I realized I hadn't really added a lot of splatters, so I'm going back in with both the Siesta Key and the Spring Dandelion and adding a few more splatters, and I'm just kind of concentrating those splatters on the areas of color that are there. I'm also adding some black splatters. That is watered down black acrylic paint. And I always add a few more splatters than I think I need because so many of them end up getting covered up. I wanted to have a little bit of splattering down the bottom, so I just dotted a few little dots down there. I wanted to mount the mixed media background on some pattern paper, and I didn't have enough of this paper to gut a piece of paper, so I like to do this when I have strips of paper that are 12 inches, but I don't have a whole sheet of paper. I'm just putting down some 1-inch strips of paper and making a little frame, so I am folding back the corners on 2 of the strips to make 45-degree angles on the corner. And then I'm just going to attach those down over the other pieces, and it just makes a nice little frame. And on this layout, I'm going to be putting my mixed media background on top of this, but you could also put other pattern paper on top as well. So I cut the mixed media background a little bit smaller so that you could see the pattern paper all around it. And I also ran it through my Mink. On a Paige Evans video, she suggested using a laminator to flatten out your paper, and I do feel that that works really well, and I really like that tip, and I use it all the time, and it just makes the mixed media paper just a little bit flatter and a lot easier to work with, and a lot easier to take photographs of the layout you make with it, so it doesn't curl up. So I'm going back in with a couple more splatters in places that I felt that I missed. And now I'm ready to attach that cluster down to the background. So I'm putting lots of ATG adhesive on it, and I'm positioning it, and I'm going to just double check that it's straight. Now that the photo cluster is attached down, I'm seeing a couple of areas that I wanted to add a little bit more stamping to. So I took out that background stamp. It's cool. It's a diamond shape, but it's dotted, so I added a little bit more of that to the background. I wanted to add some photo corners to the layout, so I'm using a photo corner punch that I have that I love and I use all the time. It's an EK Success photo corner punch, and I punched out the photo corners in a few different colors, and now I'm deciding which photo corners would look best on which photos, and I decided that I was going to use these colors, the ones that you see there now, but then I got a little distracted and I decided that I wanted to tuck another piece of paper behind the photo on the left. So I used a notebook edge punch and I punched along the edge of this diagonal paper, and I used again the black soot and I inked the edges, and then I just attached that down, and I like the way that added just a little bit more layering to the layout. Now I'm done being sidetracked, and I'm going to be attaching all of those photo corners down. I ink the edges of the photo corners with the black soot Distress Oxide as well, and I just use a little bit of ATG adhesive to hold them in place. Now all the photo corners are attached, and I was thinking I could use a little bit more yellow right in that spot to the right of the lower photo. So I added a little bit more yellow, and I tried to be careful not to make a mess with the watercolor spray. And now I'm going back in and I'm just dulling the color down a little bit. Up to this point, I was pretty happy with the layout, but now I'm struggling a little bit, and I'm feeling that the background is just a little bit too bright. There were stars in the sketch, so I pulled out a bunch of stars that I had in my stash, and there are these black fabric stars that you see that I just placed down the layout. So I glued those down, and then there were some red stars that were also fabric. They were a little bit smaller, so I'm gluing those down as well. Since these stars are fabric, I needed a wet glue to hold them down. So I had some Aleene's Clear Gel Tacky Glue in my stash, and I decided to use that. And now I'm using these Park Lane stickers. That's the Joanne brand, I believe. And there were a couple of little phrases that I thought were perfect for the layout, and they were just the right colors. The yellow one says best friend, and it has some cute little like dog bites taken out of it. I like that. And then the red one says woof, and the dark blue one says sit. There were also some stickers that said fetch, and they had some circles on them that had a gold star in the middle. So I peeled those off, and I was sprinkling those around the layout. And then I decided I really didn't like those black or those red stars. They just looked too flat. They didn't have any texture or any variation to them, so I decided that I was going to make some stars. So I took out these Technique Tuesday chipboard stars. I love them because they have a surface you can stamp on, and these are really old. I love these. I absolutely stocked up on them and I've been hoarding them, so I want to try to use some of them because I do have quite a few of them. So I'm using some stamps from my stash, and I'm stamping them just kind of randomly on the stars and putting some different stamps on different stars. And then I decided that I wanted to color them red. So this red color is a Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist, and it's called Red Tulip. The sprayer wasn't working, so I just put a little bit out on my table. It has a glass top, so I work right on the surface. Sometimes I use my paintbrush to spread the color, and other times I'm just dipping the stars right into the color, but I do put a layer of the color on each of the stars, and I let them dry, and I go back and I add another layer as well, just so the color will be really rich. And then the stickers that I pulled the stars from were layered, so when I pulled them apart, there was another layer that had the same image on it. So I punched those out, and now I'm using some clear epoxy circles, and I'm layering those on top, and that makes them look a little bit more like an embellishment that you buy rather than just a piece of paper that's punched out. And I'm laughing looking at my hands. They are absolutely covered in inks and paints, and they definitely look like they've been through the ringer. But I'm carrying on with the layout, so I'm spreading those stars around the layout. And then I'm tucking in those smaller stars to one of the areas between the points on the stars, and I'm trying to vary what side of the star I put those smaller stars on. So you could see that some are to the left, some are to the right, some are on top, some are below. It just makes it a little bit more interesting for the eye. Now I'm going in with some heavy duty gel medium, and I'm attaching all of the stars down. I couldn't help myself. I had a little bit of blue because when I had glued down that black star and then took the star back up again, it removed a lot of the color that was there. So I added a little bit more, and now I'm just letting it dry for a few minutes. And then I noticed with these two little stars that I'm working on now, the smaller stars are in the same spot. So I'm trying to figure out how I can switch the smaller stars around to vary that placement. And then I am continuing around the layout, and I'm just going to attach everything down. And if you've ever used heavy duty gel medium, you know that it takes a little bit of time to dry, but then once it's dry, everything's going to stay put. So I just want to make sure that everything is in just the right spot. And now I'm adding still more color to the area by that smaller banner. Now I'm going to start working on the title. I decided, after quite a bit of thinking, I decided to call the layout Point of View because the chair is literally a point where they can view what's outside. And this was my grandfather's chair. My parents had it recovered. It was this horrible green like vinyl, but they made it into a really nice chair, and the dogs just love to sit up there. So I'm using these Hip Kit Club exclusive letters. These are a great color. I love finding dark blue or navy blue letters and cardstock. I feel like I never have enough of it. I go through it pretty quickly. So I spell out point of view, and then I add in some of the stars. And then I am going to add in some journaling on the bottom. So I first write the journaling in pencil, and I wrote, Coco Jackson and Rory love to sit on my grandfather's chair and look out the window to see what's going on. Once I write it out in pencil, I go over it with some Sharpie, and I add the year. These pictures are from various times during the year. They weren't all taken in one day, so I just wrote the year for this one, and now I'm underlining each line of journaling. I still had what was left of the stickers that I punched the smaller stars from, and I noticed that they had little paw prints on them. So I went through them and I punched out the little paw print using a circle punch, a very small one, and I'm adding those to the clusters around the page. I thought they added a nice little touch, and I liked the way it was dog themed. So I just punch those out, and now I'm just using some ATG adhesive to hold them in place. To finish off the layout, I decided that I wanted to put the smallest of enamel dots on the photo corners. So I found some yellow enamel dots, some light blue ones, and some dark blue ones, and I added them to each of the photo corners, and that completes the layout. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please take a look in the description box. There will be links to all the other scrapbookers who are following along with this hop so that you can hop along and see all of their videos. I'm looking forward to seeing all the dog layouts and all the summer layouts as well. I hope if you like this video, you'll give it a thumbs up, and I hope you'll join me again soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.